What did you think of that for Donald Trump tweeting that you're a boring actor who does too many TV commercials? Oh my God, did he tweet that? Yeah, he did. The audience laughed. But Samuel L. Jackson did not. And that tiny difference became the entire story. Because what happened next was not another celebrity feud. It was not another late-night joke. It was not even about politics anymore. It became something much bigger. A room full of powerful people suddenly realized they were watching two completely different kinds of confidence collide in real time. One loud, one calm, one demanding attention, the other barely raising his voice. And before the night was over, Trump's favorite weapon against critics would somehow become the exact thing used against him. Not by shouting, not by insults, but by one brutal question nobody in the room could stop thinking about afterward. What does all that genius actually do for anyone? And once that question landed, everything changed. Donald Trump has spent years turning intelligence into a slogan, repeating genius, high IQ, and smartest in the room, as if saying the words often enough could make them a national fact. But the night Samuel L. Jackson heard that familiar brag on live television, the room changed. Jackson did not shout. He did not perform outrage. He simply took the claim, held it under the studio lights, and exposed something hiding underneath it. Something uncomfortable. Because the moment Trump started talking, people noticed something strange. This was supposed to be a charity event, a polished national fundraiser for public school arts programs. Teachers were there, parents were there, young musicians sat nervously in folding chairs backstage waiting for their performances. Donors smiled for cameras. Volunteers rushed between tables carrying clipboards and bottled water. The entire evening was supposed to focus on children, opportunity, creativity, education. But then Trump appeared by video, and within less than 2 minutes, the conversation became about Donald Trump. Again. At first it sounded harmless, typical Trump. The crowd even chuckled politely. He joked about critics, mocked reporters, took a swipe at low IQ people. Then came the familiar language. Nobody's smarter than me. Very high IQ. Top people say it all the time. The usual rhythm. But something about the room shifted this time. Maybe it was the setting. Maybe it was the fact that teachers sitting near the stage had spent the entire week fundraising for pencils, instruments, and books. Maybe it was because parents listening in the audience were exhausted from rising grocery prices, rent payments, and school stress. Or maybe people were simply tired. Tired of every moment becoming another performance. And sitting quietly near the front row, watching the entire thing unfold, was Samuel L. Jackson. Calm as stone. No dramatic reaction. No eye roll. No fake outrage for cameras. Just watching. That almost made it worse. Because Jackson has a different kind of presence. He does not need noise to control a room. He barely moves and somehow everyone pays attention anyway. And people near him started noticing something. He looked less angry than disappointed, like a teacher hearing the smartest kid in class interrupt the lesson just to brag about himself again. Then the microphone reached him, and suddenly, the entire ballroom got quieter. Not because people expected screaming, but because they sensed something sharper coming. Jackson stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, looked toward the stage monitor, and for a second, he said nothing. That silence mattered, because silence, in the hands of someone confident, becomes pressure. Then finally, he spoke, very calmly. Real intelligence doesn't need a commercial break every 5 minutes. The room exploded. Laughter, applause, even a few shocked gasps. But Jackson kept going, and this is where everything started turning against Trump in real time. Because Jackson did not try to prove Trump was unintelligent. That would have been easy, cheap, predictable. Instead, he questioned the performance itself, and that was far more dangerous. Because suddenly people were no longer asking whether Trump was smart. They were asking why a truly smart person keeps needing to announce it, over and over and over again. Jackson leaned slightly toward the microphone. Intelligence isn't volume. More applause. Intelligence isn't branding. People nodded. Intelligence listens before it talks. Now the audience became completely locked in, because everyone understood exactly what he meant without him saying Trump's name again. And then, Jackson delivered the line people would replay online all week. Some people treat genius like a gold chain. If they stop showing it off for 10 seconds, they're scared nobody will notice it's there. The crowd lost it. But across the room, something else happened. People stopped laughing at the joke and started thinking about it. That was the shift. Because Jackson had quietly transformed Trump's boast into something smaller. Not strength, not confidence, advertising. And once that idea entered the room, it infected everything. Suddenly every high IQ comment sounded rehearsed. Every brag sounded defensive. Every insult sounded like overcompensation. And Trump, watching remotely on the giant screen, seemed to feel the energy changing. You could almost see it, the smile tightening, the jaw shifting, that familiar defensive posture beginning to creep in. Because confident people usually laugh things off. Fragile people fight every joke like it's a personal threat. And Jackson knew that. That's why he stayed calm. The calmer he became, the more uncomfortable Trump looked. Then the moderator tried steering things back toward education. Big mistake. Because Jackson used the transition perfectly, and what he said next completely changed the emotional temperature of the room. He stopped talking about IQ entirely. Instead, he started talking about ordinary people. What does a high IQ mean to a teacher buying her own classroom supplies? Silence. What does genius mean to parents working 2 jobs and still struggling? The audience shifted in their seats. What does brilliance mean to veterans waiting months for help? Now nobody was laughing anymore. Because suddenly this was not about celebrity insults. It was not about Twitter feuds. It was not about entertainment. Jackson had dragged the conversation back down to earth, back to reality, back to consequences. And in doing that, he exposed the biggest weakness in Trump's entire public image. Trump talks about intelligence like a trophy. Jackson talked about intelligence like responsibility. Huge difference. One serves ego, the other serves people. And older viewers watching at home especially felt that distinction immediately, because they have seen leaders before. Real leaders. Some loud, some quiet, some charismatic, some awkward. But truly intelligent people usually share certain traits. Curiosity, patience, discipline, humility, not constant self-promotion. Jackson never said Trump lacked intelligence. He did something more devastating. He suggested intelligence without wisdom is just noise with better marketing. And that line, whether people agreed politically or not, hit hard. Then came another moment nobody expected. The moderator jokingly mentioned Trump's long-running obsession with golf. That instantly changed the energy again. Because Jackson smiled. A real smile this time. "Oh yeah," he said softly. "Now we're talking about his favorite subject." The room laughed nervously. Jackson continued. "You know what's funny about people who constantly say they're winning?" Pause. "The truly secure ones usually don't keep score out loud." The audience reacted immediately, because now the pattern was impossible to ignore. Everything with Trump seemed connected to proving himself. The smartest, the richest, the strongest, the best golfer, the best words, the best brain. And Jackson kept carefully peeling back the performance layer by layer, not aggressively, almost clinically, like someone calmly dismantling an illusion while the magician is still standing there. Then came the moment that truly broke the room. Jackson looked directly toward the camera feed, and in a near whisper, he said, "If somebody has to remind you they're brilliant every single week, maybe the reminder is doing work the reality can't do alone." Dead silence. Not even applause at first, just silence, the dangerous kind, because people were processing it. Then suddenly, boom! The entire ballroom erupted. Some stood up, others clapped while laughing in disbelief. Several people looked around at each other with that expression that says, "Did he really just say that?" Yes, he did. And Trump's reaction only made it worse. Because instead of ignoring it, he pushed back, quickly, defensively, talking faster now, interrupting, trying to regain control, claiming people were jealous, claiming the media was unfair, claiming nobody respected success anymore. But every extra sentence deepened the trap, because Jackson remained completely relaxed, and calm beside chaos always looks powerful. Always. Trump sounded emotional. Jackson sounded certain. Trump sounded reactive. Jackson sounded grounded. And audiences instinctively understand that contrast. That's why clips from the event exploded online overnight. Not because people had never seen Trump criticized before. They had. But this felt different. Most critics attacked Trump emotionally. Jackson attacked the performance structurally. He questioned why the performance existed at all. That is much harder to defend against, especially in front of ordinary Americans tired of political theater. Then another strange thing happened. People online started revisiting old Trump clips differently. Every old high IQ boast suddenly sounded less like confidence and more like reassurance. As if Trump wasn't convincing the country, he was convincing himself. And that idea spread fast. Comment sections exploded. Cable news replayed the exchange endlessly. Late-night hosts dissected every second. But the most important reactions came from regular viewers. Teachers, retirees, parents. People saying the same thing. Finally somebody asked the obvious question. Because underneath all the spectacle, the entire exchange came down to one simple issue. Results. Not branding, not slogans, not self-praise. Results. And Jackson understood something many politicians miss. Average people do not care about hearing powerful people describe themselves as geniuses. They care whether life feels harder or easier, safer or scarier, affordable or impossible. That's why his questions landed so hard. What does genius mean to struggling families? What does brilliance mean to people buried under bills? What does IQ matter if ordinary people feel abandoned? Those questions cut through every layer of performance instantly, and Trump seemed unable to escape them because there is no flashy comeback to reality. Then came the final twist. Late in the evening, after the applause faded and cameras began shutting down, one teacher near the back of the ballroom was asked what she thought about the exchange. Her answer spread online almost as fast as Jackson's speech. She said, "Samuel L. Jackson sounded like the adult in the room." That line haunted the entire conversation afterward, because suddenly people weren't debating who won an argument. They were debating maturity, discipline, perspective, and whether modern politics had become trapped inside an endless cycle of ego and spectacle. Jackson never screamed, never insulted, never lost control. That was the whole point. He embarrassed noise with calm, and that is incredibly difficult to fight against, because rage feeds conflict, but composure exposes it. By the end of the night, Trump's genius claim had not been destroyed by leaked documents, IQ scores, or complicated fact checks. It had been weakened by something much simpler: common sense. Samuel L. Jackson placed Trump's favorite label beside real people facing real struggles. And suddenly the label looked very small, very fragile, very hollow. And maybe that was the most uncomfortable part of all. Not that Jackson mocked Trump, but that he forced the room to ask a question nobody could easily answer afterward. If you are truly brilliant, why does everything always have to come back to proving it? And once that question entered the room, it never really left.